Hey guys, welcome back to Liberation Live, where you will meet the true and real God of the universe up close and in focus. Here we sort fact from fiction, truth from myth, and we unveil God and reveal God to you in a new way. And we also clarify topics surrounding God. So we'll be discussing things like God of the universe, is he the creator? God in the Bible, his beliefs, his principles, God and purpose, God and you, because God does care about you. So you may notice something a little bit different today, and that is the fact that I've spruced up my channel just a little bit for you girls and guys out there. I felt like the channel was looking a little dusty. It needed some help. And so I was like, let me just go work on it, because when I launched the channel, I just did it to get something done really quickly. I really hope you like it. When I actually first started, I did not actually put a whole lot of time into this, into like the design part of it, I guess you can say. I sort of felt like it was a lot for me to just figure out how to do a video, and I wanted to change things. So in my day job, I am a creative director and a designer. And so I was like, girl, you could do better than this. But in the beginning, when I first launched this channel, I was just trying to figure out how to work it. How do I work the camera? I don't know, help me. And I'm really not technically savvy like that. So with much prayer and perseverance, I was able to just get the channel up. Then I had to learn how to get more consistent. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna revisit the design and just the style of the channel later. So I really hope you like it. What my goal is just to, improve as I go and get it to where it needs to be. And my goal is to elevate it, because this is the thing. A lot of times things that I want in my mind are very champagne budget. Okay. But I be coming sometimes with a beer budget. I have a Corona, budget, I have a Budweiser budget. and I have to start not despise the small beginnings and just start with what I got. And eventually, as I learn more and as I can build a team and all that, then I'll be able to get it to where I can see the vision actually being at. But right now, y'all gonna have to work with what I got. Okay, so today we're in episode 3 of the Is God Real series, and we are going to be talking about if there's an intelligent designer behind the creation of the universe. And this is often called the uncaused cause in science. If you haven't heard about it, you are in the right place today, because we're going to be talking about just that. How did we get here? How did we get here on the earth? A lot of times when we think about that, we think about just how did we get here, a little beyond our parents or something. A lot of times we don't actually think about the fullness of the fact that we live on a flying space rock. Have you thought about that? We live on a flying space rock, bruh. That's crazy. That's real crazy. Just saying. Have you ever stopped to think about the fact that that is really weird? When I ask God, I'm gonna be like, how you come up with that one? That's low key, that's dope and amazing and also really weird. So anyways, let's begin. So scientists, once upon a time, forever and a day ago, used to believe that the universe was infinite, that it was eternal, that there was no beginning and no end. And one person we've all heard about and that we've learned about in school that we know is Aristotle. And he really pushed this idea. And he argued that the universe has always existed, that it would continue to exist indefinitely. And this belief is now contrary to the idea of the universe having a finite age or a specific point in time when the world began to exist. So in the 1920s, people began to change their mind about this idea. They began to realize that something isn't right about this idea that the world is eternal. And it started with Hubble was the one who began to realize that the earth was expanding, the universe was expanding. So this discovery in science really changed how we study the earth and the cosmos. It changed all of cosmology. And that began to give us the first hint and understanding that, wait a minute, the earth is not infinite. And so this was a really big deal because of the fact that, like I said, we always thought that, or I don't want to say we, but science had thought, astronomers, physicists, scientists they thought when they observed the universe that it was eternal. And so this finding ended up changing everything. It changed all of cosmology. It changed the study of the cosmos. And what ended up happening was this opened up a whole new world. It was, some people would say that, actually, I would say most scientists in this space would say that this was one of the biggest findings of the century. Like, this was huge. And so over the next few decades, what ended up happening is that people began to study it and realize, okay, if the earth is expanding, then there must be leftover heat, and that must mean that the earth had a starting point, and that really changed the game. Things got very spicy from then on, because that meant, wait a minute, our theories have been wrong about this. And I just want to throw in the fact that the Bible said it first here, because the Bible does tell us that there was a beginning. It tells us that there was a beginning. Yet what we find, which happens often in science, is that science will often make predictions, because science is really just the study of things that are already in existence, right? Scientists do not come up with, I think sometimes we make a mistake of thinking that scientists come up with the laws, right? Like the laws of physics. And we think they come up with those things. And that's a misunderstanding. And people forget the fact that no, scientists, they are studying something that they think is in place. They're studying laws that are already in existence. The law of gravity, they're studying that. They don't invent that. They see it, they observe it, they find it, they discover it, so to say, right? It's kind of like Adam and Eve, where God creates Adam, he creates the animals, and he drops it all there, right? And then he says, now you name them. You name the animals, right? And so we see that God, his creator hand is there, right? He's creating things, but then he gives us the authority and the wherewithal and the mind, the intelligence, being that we are the imago Dei, the image of God, to then go figure it out. Go ahead and observe it, find it, see the genius in it. That's right. That's me. That's God. And so that's what ends up happening. But sometimes, because the world perceives God as being silent, they come to the conclusion, right? They come to the conclusion that these things just appeared. And because scientists are studying them, that scientists invented it or something. No. The things around the study around math, for example, okay, well, mathematics was already there. The formulas and all that, that was there. The equations were there. But what ends up happening is they find it, they happen upon it, and they say, oh, wait a minute. But this is the thing. Actually, I think I'm going to do a video on this. I'm not even going to go into it. I'm going to pause it there. But I'll say this one thing. And I think it was John Lennox that said this really well. He uses this. He's a mathematician. He uses this really good analogy for it, where he says, I'm going to mess it up. So, because sorry, guys, I had to make an adjustment to my light because it was getting really dark in here. So anyways, I was talking about John Lennox, and great mathematician, as I was saying, and he gave a really, really good explanation about this, an illustration about this that helps us grasp, right, why science is limited. It's limited. And sometimes we put it on such a pedestal. We think that it determines so much. And we also tend to see it almost, for a lot of people, for certain groups, almost like a religion in itself. What we believe in, what we have faith in, what we put our trust in, right, is what science says. And I want to read this thing from John Lennox. I'll try to make it, it's quick. It's a quick little illustrations that explains this. And it's using a really good analogy that I was just like, that's good. So this is what it says. He's saying, I have Aunt Matilda that baked a beautiful cake. We take it along and we analyze it by a group of top scientists and ask them for an explanation of how the cake was made. And they go to work. They tell us about the number of calories that the cake has. They tell us its nutritional value and effect. The biochemists inform us about the structure of the proteins and the fats in the cake. And the chemists, they tell us about their bonding. And the physicists will analyze the cake in terms of fundamental particles. And the mathematicians will no doubt offer a set of elegant equations to describe the behavior of those particles. Now that these experts have given, using their scientific discipline to give us an exhaustive description of the cake, can we say that the cake has been completely explained? We have certainly been given a description of how the cake was made, how its various elements relate to each other. But I suppose now I ask the assembled experts a final question. Why was the cake made? The grin on Aunt Matilda's face says that she knows the answer, because she made the cake. And she made it for a purpose. But all the nutrition scientists, biochemists, physicists, mathematicians in the world were not able to answer the question. And it's no insult to their discipline, but they can answer things about the nature and the structure of the cake, but answering how is outside of their discipline. They cannot answer why something was made. They can only tell you, some of the elements of how it was made, right? In fact, the only way we should ever get the answer is as if Aunt Matilda reveals it to us. But if she does not disclose the answer to us, the plain fact is that no amount of scientific analysis will enlighten us on the purpose of the cake. And so I hope that gives you like a good understanding of what it is that I'm trying to say about the fact that science is really limited, right? Science, don't get me wrong, that it answers a lot of things for us, right? It's wonderful. It's something that we hold with great value, and we should. But I think we have to understand where that limitation is and where the parameters and boundaries are around that, and respect that. And they should also respect their boundaries also, which I find that a lot of scientists don't. And then what ends up happening is they end up putting in their ideologies in with their teachings and findings around science to try to estimate why something was made. And this is the thing, that's outside of the parameters of what you do, right? And it's also going to be biased, right, to what your personal beliefs are about something. And so it's just important to understand this about science, and to tie that back in with what I'm saying about head scratcher. What am I talking about? The uncaused cause about the universe is, back to Edwin Hubble. So Edwin Hubble, as he makes this discovery, they realize that the Earth has a beginning. Now, that is actually a good point, right? Because what we're talking about is the limitations of science. And here we see that up until this point, right, so many thousands of years, we've thought, right, in science that the Earth did not have a beginning. And what's funny is all along that time, you have Christians and people who believe there is a God who are all sort of standing against scientists and saying, no, we believe that the Earth did have a beginning. And so they were kind of looked down upon, because throughout all this time where things are changing by science, and science is making new findings, right? Because they're studying the laws and things that are in place. They're studying what's here. And that's how they're coming to their determinations. And what ends up happening is that people then align to around that, like as if it's religion, as if it's fact, when right now, science itself will tell you that things are conditional, right? This is what we believe it is now. If we have another finding that tells us differently, and it's a much greater finding than what we have, then we make an adjustment. Well, that's a really big adjustment, right? To believe that the earth is eternal and was infinite, to then now realize, no, the earth had a beginning. And then over these decades, they started to see that there was leftover heat. Leftover heat tells us that the earth had a beginning. So imagine if you have like a hot stove, and you come in and you see that the stove is hot, right? Well, it's kind of like that, where you come in, you see the stove is hot, and you say, oh, somebody must have just cooked something, right? The stove is warm, right? It's the same thing. It was such a big event for the earth to come into existence that there had to be some leftover heat from that event. And we were able to see over that span of time, from the 20s till about the 60s, which is when I believe they found out that the Big Bang, they learned about the Big Bang, and that came into play. And that's kind of like how it went. And so, somewhere in there, I think maybe the 70s, two people, I forget their names, but I'll probably insert it in here. They ended up discovering the leftover heat, the leftover radiation from when the earth came into existence. So they were able to prove this. It was an accidental find. I think they were looking for something else or doing something else, and they happened upon it. And so this is very interesting stuff, because I want to actually pause here to talk about the difference in perspective and give you some really good analogies to think about. So in cosmology, you have two ways of thinking that sort of dominate within cosmology, and that is a naturalistic worldview. And then on the other side of that, you have what some people call a supernatural worldview, where on the naturalistic side, they have like more of an evolutionary point of view, where they believe that the universe and everything in it came into existence from nothing and resulted from natural processes, right? Without the involvement of any supernatural force or divine force, any supernatural power or divine force. And then you have the supernatural side, a worldview, which believes the opposite of that. They do believe that there was some sort of supernatural force behind how things came into existence. So let's use an analogy where we use dominoes. Now, I want to give the naturalistic perspective first, and then later on, I'll jump into the supernatural perspective. But imagine this. So the thing with this naturalistic perspective is they believe in something along the lines of like a blind, purposeless process, right? Where they think that things happen by coincidence. Now, I want you to put your thinking caps on. Imagine you have a set of dominoes, right? Now, we know that when you have a set of dominoes, right, you have to push it to make it start, right? But the naturalistic perspective would say, well, what really happens, what we think has happened is you take the dominoes and you take a big chunk, throw it, and wherever it falls, right? But what's happened is you're going to notice like natural sequences and natural patterns that have just taken place, and it happens perfectly. And so when you see patterns, forming, it was a coincidence. When you see things working perfectly, it was a coincidence. Now, I want you to add up all of them coincidences from living on this flying space rock. Honestly, in the series, I'm going to go through as many examples I can for you of why this is absolutely ridiculous. You have things that are possible. Sure, anything is possible, but not all things are probable. Not all things are probable. I'm going to say that over and over again because of the fact that from between people and DNA, the miracle of childbirth, the patterns that we find in literally everything natural, the perfect order in which the world was made, the fine tuning of the universe, which is one of the videos I have coming up. So please stay tuned for that. Don't forget to subscribe. All like so many things, I would need a legal pad to write it all down. You telling me all of these things are coincidences? I would tell you that it is scientifically impossible. And many scientists will tell you that. And don't get it twisted in thinking that all scientists are atheists or unbelievers, right? Because you should know that the majority of scientists, I think it's like somewhere around 60%, believe in God. And so just, like know that and keep that in mind, that just because you're a scientist doesn't mean that you align to the atheistic perspective. That I want you to think about this domino thing and this mindset. So you're telling me that the earth just came into existence and just appeared. It just appeared out of nowhere and everything in it just like dominoes. I want you to think about that with your thinking cap and whether that really makes sense. But before I move forward, I just mentioned the fact that, yes, all things are possible. We can say anything is possible, right? We can argue that it just about anything is possible. But like I was saying earlier, not everything is probable. And so with that said, I want you to understand that throughout the series and just in life, right, there are parameters and boundaries that we must place around probability. Right. So you can say, yeah, there's a chance that my mom tried to poison me this morning. There's a chance that my spouse is trying to kill me. There's a chance that I'm gonna walk in the house and find a shark in my living room. We can do some math on that. Right. But is it probable? There are bounds to probability. And so it's not likely that certain things will fall within the realm of probability. And these are things that we need to keep in mind, right? The same thing I think goes with our intuition. Inside of you, you have something that tells you that something is true or false. There's a reason that so many people across the earth, they all came in unison, not necessarily together, but in unison thought, dang, like there must be a God, because look at this. We don't know how thunder works. And so we're going to make a God of thunder. But this is the most insane thing we've ever seen, right? We all have an understanding. When we go out, for example, and we travel, all of us love to travel. We all love to adore the beauty that's in the world. We love to go to Paris. We love to go to see natural, beautiful landscapes across the earth. We will travel near and far. We will take a 20-something hour flight to go and see the beauty in the world, right? We stand in awe of this beauty, the mountains, the oceans. I think that I don't even say I think, the word tells us that when you see it, you recognize, and the word tells us that we recognize somebody did this, right? It's like seeing a beautiful painting, or anytime we see anything in the world where somebody has made it with trained and educated hands, right? We know and we recognize that beauty. We stand in awe of it when we see a beautiful work, a beautiful building. But the difference between that and the natural, that we see, which, by the way, no matter what you see that gets made in the earth, right? Between whether it's a dope music album, an insane art piece, a beautiful work of art when it comes to some sort of architecture or whatever, a wonderful exhibit or whatever you may see, right? Notice that none of it ever compares to the beauty that you see in the world. None of it ever compares to that beautiful mountain you drove to see and then took a hike to climb. Nothing compares to that scenic view of the ocean. Like nothing compared. Nothing compares to the power of it and how it stands so high, so mighty, so strong. Like nothing compares to that. The fact that we've only explored like 25% of the ocean. When we see things that are made by human hands, we stand in awe of it, but it cannot ever, no matter what we create, notice it can't ever compare. Same thing with our computers. I think it was Bill Gates himself that said that the computer is literally a duplicate, or I should say a copy of in its best, in their best form of DNA. And I'm going to do a video on that also. But he said it didn't even come close. It doesn't even come close to the complicated information that DNA has. Okay. And there's a difference between a pattern, quote unquote, a pattern, like some atheists like to put it. Oh, that's just a pattern. No. That's information. Coding is information, not a pattern. And it modeled itself after the information put in DNA. And I want you to think about the fact that right now, if somebody puts out a dope album, you gonna be like, oh my God. Like, let's say you see a dope album, or you walk into a gallery, you see the most amazing work you've ever seen. What will all humans say when we see something that is so amazing to us? We say, oh my God, who made that? Who did that? What's their name? They got a website, an Instagram? What's their IG? TikTok? Because are you selling it is what I want to know. Can I throw my dollars at you? Can I give you all of my wallet? Can I have it? Let me buy it. It's on replay for the next year. Like, that's how we treat it. Now, can you imagine? I'm going to use Beyonce for an example. If Beyonce drops a album and it's one of the best albums of all of her life, right? And let's say you don't know her yet and you're just getting introduced to her album. When you hear it, right? Or even the first time you heard a Beyonce album, right? You heard it and you fell in love with the album, or whoever that person is for you. Can you imagine being that artist, right? Can you imagine being Beyonce or Michael Jackson and people worshiping your work but completely ignoring you? I want you to let that sink in. I want you to imagine that you're the artist and you put out the dopest work ever, the best thing that's been of the century. Okay, you put that out and everybody gets to worshiping it. They buy it, they go observe it, they go take pictures of it, they put it on the gram, they love it, they make it a religion. Okay, oh my God, this work, we worship it, right? All of it. But then they ignore you. No, this work just came into existence. It just appeared. The work just appeared. It just appeared. Don't you talk to me about a maker of, I don't care who you say created this. And they actually get livid and violent with you if you dare speak of the name of the artist that made it. Because sometimes you need to think about stuff and put it into perspective and think about, like, does that actually make sense? Because how many people maybe you, if it's you, just pretend it's your neighbor, get upset, straight up mad if somebody mentions the word God around you. But you go to the beach but you go and enjoy the nice weather, but you go and breathe air, because see, you haven't even been on the earth long enough to even be so upset. Like, you don't even know, you can't control the day you live, the day you're born, and the day you die. You can't control any of it. But you have an opinion so strong. And you've been here for what, 15, 13, 20, 30 years, 40, 45. Whether it's 15 or 45, you ain't been here long. You are a blip on the radar. And you get upset at the thought of God. If that's you really should stop and think about that. Because it's really disrespectful, high key. You would be so upset if you created the greatest work ever, put out the greatest work ever, and the work was worshipped, but you were stomped on. You were so stomped on, you were killed. You were so stomped on, you were murdered. You were so stomped on. You were the most hated figure on the earth, but you created the greatest work. I really want you to think about, that. And even if you think it's not true, I want you to stop for a moment as if it was true to you and think about that. How hurtful that would be. All the beautiful work in the world, all the wonderful music, from the Michael Jacksons to the Beyoncés to the Michelangelos, and no match for God. No match. I think we can all say hands down, no match to the beauty that we see in this earth. Now, going back to the game that we were talking about and all its puzzle pieces, right? As a reminder, the naturalistic view says that it randomly came together with no purpose and just everything just fit together, right? It wasn't planned. Nobody designed it. Wasn't any intelligence behind putting the puzzle together. But you see, the Bible tells us that in the beginning, there was a beginning, that creation came into existence by his handiwork, by his hands. And you may be thinking, well, how do we know that it's your God? Because the thing about it is Christianity often can look like play. Like it can look like a little fairy tale. It can look like Santa Claus to people. But the thing about it is that when you really do your homework and you study, you begin to see that at first glance, it appears to be childlike. You know, it appears to be like, oh, you telling me somebody got swallowed by a whale and it came out, right? It sounds ridiculous to people. But then when you begin to really study history, science, and all the different disciplines, and then you go look back at the book and its historicity, and you look at the proof of the behind the book, and you look at the different accounts, because it's not one author, and you look at this group of the Israelites and how they were countercultural and how the hand of God was on them, and different people outside of the Bible can account for it, of what happened to them. The miracles, the signs and the wonders. And like when you really start adding everything up, all of a sudden it don't look like a fantasy no more. It becomes more and more and more and more real. And one of the things around what we're talking about right now with the creation is the fact that there is no other holy book where their creation account matches up with what it is that science is saying. Now, just so you know, and I'm going to get into this another time, but just to touch on it, you only really have a few major religions, right, in the world. And then you have a lot of folk religions, or animism, I think is how you pronounce it, where I ain't going to get into that, but you have only a few major religions. And of course, that's Christianity, which we're talking about right now. You got Hinduism, where their religious texts are very mythical, especially to around the creation, how things have come into play. They kind of rule themselves out with the fact that everything is infinite, right? And there's a lot of other things that rule it out, but it does not align to the findings in science, right? Buddhism is an offshoot of Hinduism. Okay, so those two are really, really related to each other. And then we have Islam. And Islam defers back to the Torah and the Bible in order to give proof to its text being true according to its own holy scriptures. I'm not even going to get into that in this video. But then you have Judaism, which the first half of the Bible, right? Christianity comes from Judaism, started with it. And so you have the first half of the Bible, which is the same books as their books, right? It's the same. The books that are within the Bible are their books that they have in the Torah. The difference is the New Testament. They believe that a Messiah was coming. The word prepared them for a Messiah coming, but the discrepancy is who the Messiah was, right? So they believe they're still waiting on the Messiah. The Christians believe the Messiah already came, right? And that's where the two groups differ and disassociate. Okay, so they continued on with Judaism and they didn't make any changes, and they continued to wait for the Messiah. The Christians, the Jewish people and Gentiles, people who were not Jewish, that came into believing that this was the Messiah, then accepted this faith. What I just named to you are your major religions, right? And so 3 of those are going to have very similar creation accounts, being that 2 of them are offshoot of one. Or you can really argue that Islam is kind of an offshoot of Christianity and Judaism, but strong disagreement between what Islam believes versus what Christianity and Judaism believe. Okay, so that said, I feel like you can really deduce, and when you do your studying around science and around some of the other disciplines, right, you really can make the discovery and realize and see that you can figure out and find out the truth. The truth is not something that nobody can know. When you hear people say you can't know the truth, or the truth is whatever you determine it to be, no, that's not true. And we have to be careful of allowing the changes, which change all the time, right? The ideologies of society, which change literally with the wind, aligning to it and determining that must be true when that changes all the time. One generation believes this and the next generation is going to believe that, and that to them is going to be true. Does that make it true? Right? And so I think you just have to be careful of that and not be afraid of what you stand for. So anyways, my point being is that the Bible and Torah it's the only book that gives accurate account how the beginning happened. It's the only one. There is no other. And the Bible's description about it is like very, very structured and given in a sequential manner, breaking down how the universe came into existence. And so it's not like it just happened upon it or accidentally, like very, very structurally gives you how it happened. And across the rest of the Bible, not just in Genesis, also speaks about different parts of creation and to some degree, and it reconfirms and expands on it. And I'm going to share some of those scriptures throughout, like, and put it up on a screen for you so that you can see them. But we can also go through a couple of them. Genesis 1:1 tells us, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This opening verse in the Bible's creation narrative establishes that God is the creator of the universe. It establishes him as that. It sets the stage for the rest of what you're going to read. It really does. Genesis also tells us that God said, let the land produce vegetation and seed bearing plants and trees, right? And that's what the land did. It told us that God said, let us make mankind in our own image, in our own likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and the wild animals. And it also tells us, I believe it's in Hebrews, that the earth was created out of nothing. So even though the Bible's creation story is about God's actions and it's theological in nature, it also is set in real historical and cultural context. And archaeology and history and science supports the events that are there. So this makes it different from the stories that are just symbolic or made up in other religious texts, because the events in it are real, and you won't find, like, scientifically, this is true. Historically, this is true. You won't find another book that has stronger evidence of its history. So these things are important to know, that you can't just throw all religions in one bucket and assume that, oh, there's so many of them. Like I hear people say that all the time. Like, oh my God, you listen to religion. Oh my gosh, all these religions, and it's like, yo, it's actually like there are lots of little folk religions or something around the world that are really within small cultural contexts or tribes or right. But generally speaking, you only have a few major religions and they make up the majority of the world. The majority of the world is Christian for a reason, not because they are blind followers. You got to know it's for a reason. And you have to be careful of just making an assumption that it's foolishness or people are just foolish or that they're following it because it makes them feel good or because they need some sort of faith, because you would be incorrect in making that assumption. And so another thing, too, is to be careful of thinking that you can blend them, because these religions are staunchly against one another's beliefs. And so you can't blend religions. In a sense, it's like we talk about appropriation, but nobody really talks about that when it comes to religions, because we see it as something that must be true to you and what you want to do and personal to you. But the truth of the matter is that people have their beliefs and their religions, and it really does belong to them, right? And so if you make the decision, I'm gonna mix Hinduism with Christianity with Islam, and you like, those religions are staunchly against one another. The beliefs do not blend together. They cannot be mixed. They believe something completely different, and either one of them is right and the rest of them are wrong. They don't work in unison. Side-eyeing you new agers out there. I'm just saying, like, you can't blend those, and anybody from those groups will tell you you can't. And if we're being honest, a low key, high key will be an offense really to those different groups for you to take their religion and mix it with others and then say, I'm creating this one religion here, right? They will tell you, yo, you can't do that. Like, you can't do that. And low key, it's appropriating, but nobody's talking about that part. So I'm just saying, this is something that, you should think about. You should think about that. Okay? Now let's get back to this dude, Edwin Hubble, right? How I mentioned earlier that he was the reason that there was a big shift made in science between the 20s to the 60s, where they discovered that the Earth had a beginning, and that began to shift cosmology. And as a result, there was this discovery of the Big Bang, which we have a video coming on very soon. I wanted us to stick with the domino analogy, right? And I want you to imagine you have a never ending line of dominoes, infinite line of dominoes stretching forever and ever and ever. And each domino falls because the one before it pushed it. Now ask yourself, can this infinite line of dominoes exist without a starting point? Can it exist without a starting point? I'm going to answer that for you. The answer is it can't. It can't. It needs a starting point. I want you to think about if there are footprints in the sand at the beach that says, Jackie loves Harry. Jackie loves Harry. Can that just appear in the sand? Would you say, oh my God, these big waves came and made Jackie loves Harry? Or would you say that's information somebody wrote? Either Jackie wrote it or Harry wrote it. Right? I'm doing this because I want you to stop and make note and think about things, because this is the thing. This is the law of cause and effect. Everything that starts to exist has to have a cause. And these are just like the rules of science here. If something comes into existence, it's because something else made it happen. So like I said, with the footprints in the sand, that's information, right? There's a difference between data, but then you have like information, that communication. That's different. That's a different thing. And science tells us that the universe had a start. And if it had a start, the universe had to have had a cause. And so now the question becomes, what was that cause, right? It's no secret. I've been talking about God all of this time. So, you know, that's where I stand. But you may be wondering, if you're saying that God is the cause of this start, the cause of the start of the universe, then what brought him into existence? What brought God into existence? Whatever brought the universe into existence, in its existence was created time, matter, and space. Time, matter, and space. The elements, all the elements that we know. Remember that periodic table you learned about in school? All the elements from iron, right? All the elements, oxygen, all that wonderful stuff you learned, right? That didn't exist before the universe was created. It did not exist. It came into existence. So it's important to think about nothing. Nothing cannot create anything. If it's nothing, nothing's going to be created. Nothing, not a thing, not a single thing. So I want you to think about that, because that means that whatever created the universe had to be outside of time, space, matter, had to be outside of it. It had to be what they call the uncaused cause. So that would mean that whatever this thing is that created is got to be a few things. The reason it's described as God is because whatever created the universe has to be extremely intelligent. The genius of how the planets are situated just perfectly so there could be life on Earth, how the Earth is tuned to all the right levels, that if it was just off just a little bit, the Earth wouldn't be conducive to having life on it. When we think about how bodies are made and DNA, when we think about the miracle of childbirth, we try to recreate stuff that God did, and we can't. We cannot do it. And it's because of the fact that whoever did this is extremely smart. They're just smart. They're too smart for you and me and she and he. Too smart. Okay. And so that's the first thing that you should know, is that whatever created this thing is very intelligent. And whoever created the universe also has to be extremely powerful. And it's funny because the Bible tells us that God describes himself as being outside of this world, outside of time, all powerful, and the reason that everything exists. And the atheist stands on the other side because they would say, no, know. And this is actually where it gets a bit weird for the atheists, because there was a time where when they believed that the earth was infinite, the need for Christians to defend themselves was more of what was up for discussion. It was like they had the burden of proof more so, where the atheists, now the tables have turned, that now that we see that there is a beginning very clearly proven, and now the burden of proof is really now on them, and they struggle because this is where it really doesn't make sense. It's multiple places it doesn't make sense, but this is where it really doesn't make sense, because they'll say, well, you know, we think it just came into existence. But again, this is common sense. Right now, can a sky rise that reaches up to heaven just pop into existence? Can it happen? Like, use that with anything, really, that's real, tangible, complex, right? Can it happen? And even in whatever you think of is not going to be anything compared to life, right? Life came into existence. We can't even duplicate life. We can't duplicate it right now. None of the other planets have it. As far as we can figure out, none of the other planets have it. And we'll never know, because it would take so many light years to get to planets outside of our universe. So we'll never know. We just won't know. We won't know. And this is where a lot of atheists concede, because of the fact that, like genuinely speaking, not saying that, like, a lot of them concede at this point. It was William Lane Craig that said this: to believe the universe came out of nothing is worse than magic. At least when a magician pulls a rabbit out of the hat, there's a magician and there's a hat. But with this, there's nothing. There's nothing. And you're saying nothing created all of this. But nothing cannot create anything. Nothing is literally nothing. If you don't put nothing in your bank account, ain't nothing gonna be there. You're not gonna produce money. You won't produce anything in that bank account. Ain't nothing gonna be there, because ain't nothing there. Nothing's there. You will be broker than broke. We all understand the concept of nothing. So this is why they have to concede at this point. I think another thing to understand too is the idea that the earth was eternal actually really began with Greek philosophers. And it was funny because after Aristotle, Galileo, I think, came along, and he used the telescope in the sky and surprised everybody and noticed that space was moving, unlike what Aristotle thought, which I think he thought everything was static or not moving. And so that was really interesting, because Galileo saw moons, he saw Jupiter and changes in its appearance, and that to him proved that there was movement, unlike what Aristotle thought. And so it was Galileo that said Earth moves around the sun, which is different than Aristotle's idea that Earth was the center of everything. And he also did experiments that showed that things move on the earth, which went against Aristotle's belief that everything in the universe was perfect and unchanging. Now, even though Galileo found that the earth was not eternal, scientists held the view that the earth was eternal, and they were completely shocked when Edwin Hubble discovered the expanding universe and the implications of the expanding universe, and that there was a beginning and the earth was not eternal. In fact, it's important to understand that infinity is actually not even a real thing. It's really just a concept. So imagine that you're counting numbers starting from 1 and going on forever. Infinity is like saying, keep going. You'll never reach the end. It's a concept we use in math and other areas to talk about things that never stop or have no limit, but it's just a concept. It's not actually real. So infinity is not like a regular number. It's not like 5, 10, or 100. It's a symbol if you think about infinity, and that's because it's communicating to us that it's never ending. You can't really think about something that is infinite. There's some things that appear like they go on forever, but they don't. They have parameters and bounds, right? So nothing is truly infinite. It has a size, it has an age, it has bounds, and it may be incredibly vast, but everything has a limit. And with that said, the universe can't have an infinite number of events in the past. It has to have had a beginning. And scientists finally agree with that. And that's where the Big Bang comes in, which we'll talk about next time. But for now, I'll at least say this. Everybody's now on the same page. All the scientists, no matter what their background beliefs are in spirituality, or that spirituality is not a real thing, everybody at least does believe that the universe now has a beginning. Some people call it the Big Bang, whatever you want to call it, we can deduce that. So I think the part, though, that this is where the disagreement happens is the fact that we don't know, or we can't come to an agreement, of course, on who created it, right? And so what I mentioned before is that whoever created this had to be powerful, they had to be intelligent, and they also have to be transcendent, meaning that they're beyond or above the normal range of things. They're above the human experience, right? They're outside of the universe. And when you look at all the religions, that sounds like just one God. There's just one. Sorry, I can't help but smile. I'm lame. It's the Christian God. I'm just saying, the Christian God is the only God that is transcendent, doesn't fit into the time boxes, describes himself that way, living outside of the timeline of the earth, right? And so actually, I want to share a quote by William Lane Craig. He said, "A cause of space and time must be uncaused, beginningless, timeless, spaceless, immaterial. They must be a personal being endowed with freedom of will and enormous power." Enormous power. So I strongly encourage you, to do some digging on the topic. God did this as a free and personal act, as a declaration of his glory. And we can see that creation is distinct from God, but it's also dependent on God. And I don't want you to count on me or to count on what I'm saying as the truth. I want you to go dig on your own, because I know that when you truly do dig and you go beyond the surface, right? Because you have a lot of naysayers who make a lot of claims. And if you just listen to that, but you don't push beyond people's opinions of things, but just look at the hard facts and where it's pointing to, look at the history, look at different people's accounts, what they were willing to die for. Okay. Keep in mind, people aren't willing to just die for nothing, right? People were willing to die after the resurrection of Christ. When you really look at these things, it's going to point one way. But if you look at it from the surface and you just base it off of someone's opinion really quick, and in the statement, people make a lot of flip statements, and you determine what you believe based on that, you can make a massive mistake, because you have to remember that all of us are just a blip. We really are. And that's not to be negative or whatever, but we really are. We're a vapor. We're here and then we're gone. Right? People have been making statements about the Bible for so long. They're gone. The Bible is still here. Right? I'm just saying. Mountains, oceans, still here. The things that God created, still here. And we go on and pass away. And so it's important not to look to another created thing to tell you, But look at the facts. Remember, scientists are studying what's in existence. Do your due diligence and study it, and then come to your conclusions. But don't allow another, and I'm a created thing too. I'm a vapor, just like you. I'll be here and then I'll be gone, just like you. And so don't allow anybody to tell you, but allow God to speak, because he's not a vapor, and he can show you the truth. There's a reason that the greater majority of the world are believers in God. And I'll leave it there because this thing has gone on long enough and I am sleepy. Mad sleepy. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share it with people, and come back. I'm going to be putting out a whole lot more for you. I think the next video is on the Big Bang, if I'm not mistaken. And then the one after that, I think, is on fine tuning. So I hope you enjoy. Please let other people know about the series. Is God real? And till next time. Thank you for tuning in to Liberation Live. Bye now.